Hey there, this is Tanner Steed. Welcome back. We are now moving on to the Grisaille stage in the Portrait Challenge. I'm working alongside Christian Mora and Ben Walling. If you haven't seen the other videos, stop here and make sure you click this link in the top right corner to check out the drawing stage and kind of the setup for this challenge. So today we're working on something called the Grisaille stage. And the Grisaille stage is a translation of the drawing stage into oil paint onto a canvas. So we've transferred our pencil sketches onto a canvas. Some of us are using just acrylic gessoed masonite. Others are using oil primed linen on boards. And we're all following this stage called the Grisaille, which is a black and white painting, just focusing on values and translating a pencil to oil paint. Oil paint has a bit of a different texture and fluidity to it, rather than just the additive approach of a pencil. A pencil, you can build up the values by shading over earlier layers, and it slowly gets darker. And you can take an eraser and slowly increase the value with that. With oil paint, you have to mix everything on your palette and directly paint the exact value. And in this case, we are actually working with not just black and white, but titanium white, raw umber, and ivory black. And this actually allows us to focus not only on values, but color temperature. So when we're mixing on the palette, we need to take that into account. It isn't just, is it lighter or darker, but now we're asking ourselves, is it warmer or is it cooler? So with all of those complexities, it's much more challenging than just the drawing stage. Now this stage is different than the drawing stage, in which when you're drawing, the drawing itself will stay fixed on the canvas. And if you were to erase a mark or remove a value or deepen a shade, the structure of the drawing remains pretty concrete, and it remains there throughout the process. Now when you're painting and you're using a paintbrush, which is a lot wider or varies in size, this will impact the orientation of shapes as you are adjusting the color value. So during this process, we are reaching for the drawing throughout the entirety of the process. We're reaching for accuracy of the colors, the temperature, the value, but also more importantly is the accuracy of the proportions. And ultimately, because these are, the challenge was a commissioned portrait, we are trying to make it look like the person and develop a likeness. So this is also important for us to take into consideration when giving each other a critique. But as a side note, this is a stage where we are reaching towards an accurate depiction of the sitter. Let's get started. As you can see, I am reaching for the drawing. Let me mention early on that I, for some reason, had a really hard time figuring out the warms and cools using raw umber and ivory black. For some reason I was trying to push. I was like, okay, skin is warm. It wasn't until I really just said, you know what, I'm just going to look at the reference and I'm just going to try to paint what I see as close as possible, but really not think too much about color temperature, because I did feel limited. I was like, okay, the lips are obviously warmer, but for some reason it just did not feel right to use too much raw umber without some ivory black, which would severely cool it off. It's very restrictive, that palette. So I was really mostly focused on values and then just reaching for the drawing. Some future alterations that I plan on doing with values. One in particular is the white in the eye. When I look at this, I see the white on the left of the eye is a bit too bright for me.
Yeah, that other eye, I really like how the eyeball itself is cool, and then the iris is like warm, and you let the umber show through. I think that looks it looks marbled. It's sick.
One thing that I thought was really cool was something that Sprick was talking to me about, with the iris being an inverted cone. And I was really trying to think of that and planning out my next moves once I moved to color. So I tried to make your eyes warm. Obviously they're brown, right? So next to it needed to look cooler, right? So the white of the eye has more ivory black in it than your iris. And then I was also trying to be aware of the light source. This is the iris. This side of the iris needs to be brighter than this side because it's an inverted cone. So when the light comes in, catches there, the highlight is on this side. It's darker over there.
It's concave instead of convex.
Exactly. Yeah. So I never understood that until Sprick was explaining that to me. And so I'm planning to push that further, but I was like playing at that idea.
And the in the hood of his sweatshirt here, how you have these like long, like confident brush strokes that just like jut out from the painting.
I like the soft edges
around.
Yeah, back here and that's nice.
And I'm trying to find places where I can lose you and find you.
Yep.
I find that so beautiful in a painting where it's lost and found. It isn't that drawing that we did early on and staying within. It's not an Ang. It's not a Bouguereau. It's going to be one of the Impressionists, And with backgrounds, I don't think of them as separate from the object. Right. I think the more I paint portraits and the more I paint subjects with a clear focal point, like a portrait like this, the more I realize that the background is a reaction to the subject. So how can I make the subject more like the subject? Or how can I make the subject contrasted in the right places? So the background isn't something to fill, in my opinion. It's something that influences the perception of what you're looking at here.
Right.
Like, I don't want you to look at the back of his head, so I need to have soft edges. I need to have limited contrast generally, and that's in terms of color temperature, in terms of brush strokes, thickness of paint. There needs to be a heck of a lot less happening back here than there is here, but it also needs to remain balanced. So I can't have too much over here because this side of the painting will feel underdeveloped and incomplete. So it's the background is a reaction to the focal point.
Was just literally separating the values. That's literally all I did. Tanner gave me a really, really good point where the roundness of the head, like with the light coming here, that side is not gonna be as bright as this side because it's going away. So that helped a lot, and that made it look a lot better. I know that my values are a little dark, I think.
So was your underpainting that umber tone, and then you built up the grays on top of that?
So yeah, I started basically with this, kind of like this color, very washed out,
but not
thin.
super
washed
dark.
out, but very warm too.
Right.
I'm also noticing how cool, as in temperature, the portrait feels.
And that is interesting because I mixed raw umber with the ivory black.
Yeah.
This whole thing has both colors.
That's wild.
So it also is my first time using raw umber, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So it was very...
And this was mine too. And I ran into that same issue where, like, if you were to mix both of them together, ivory black is a very potent color, and it kind of overwhelms the raw umber.
Very, very quick. Like,
exactly, so quick.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing is kind of splitting it into two value mixtures, where I had a warm value mixture going from light to dark, and then a cool value mixture going from light to dark. And yes, you will mix in between those two, but that kind of helped me stay separate. And I'm not saying that's bad whatsoever. I'm just saying that is the first thing that I noticed is that it is relatively cool
It's
compared
really
to certain portions of mine and your background.
Yeah, and I mean, once I go into with the real colors or whatever,
Right.
full color
Full color
palette,
palette.
yeah, then I guess I'll figure out the warms and cools.
You were saying that it's too dark, but your shadows are so pronounced that, like, the more you look at it, the more you realize that it is very balanced.
It does feel harmonious in value, and I think it might look dark as a result of the white of the canvas. If the white of the canvas was stained,
Right.
or any other color
Totally.
than white as white could get on a canvas, it might actually look perfectly related.
And the
That's a good point.
nice thing about a Grisaille is nothing is set in stone. You can increase values on both sides of the spectrum. Yeah, if you wanted to warm up and add more value, like to that forehead piece, which is probably the lightest part of the portrait, you can always do that later, though. Besides the highlights in the eyes, of course.
Yeah.
And being a larger mass, I feel like the forehead should feel lighter. Because it's able to catch more light.
Right.
Compared to maybe that highlight on the ridge of the nose, there should also be like a highlight on the side of the head. Like actually, as you physically turned to me, as I was explaining this, I can see it on your face.
So, I didn't go as deep into the value scale as I wanted to. This is more of a map than a true Grisaille, I would say. I used a ton of umber. It did that to keep the shadows uniform, so I could treat it just like a drawing. My plan is to cool the lights and the darks because it's all fairly warm, and I would like to push the beard back with like more ivory black mixed in, not because there's umber in every single like portion of this painting besides where the canvas is showing through. Essentially. That jacket you're wearing looked really fun to paint. And the shirt, like I'm obsessed with hitting the variations of textures right now in terms of like what brush stroke is needed to achieve cloth as opposed to like knitted wool, as opposed to like hair, as opposed to a wall or wallpaper. And a lot of times I find it's just the way you move your wrist or how tight you hold the brush or whatever, which is kind of what I did with like your beard, was a tighter brush than I used on most everything else besides like the eyes, and I just quickly did little wispy brush strokes across your beard. Hair is something I really struggle with as far as texture goes, especially when it's white background and the hair is darker than the background, and I tend to over exaggerate the hair more than I want to, and I feel like it doesn't always have a lively feel to it, and maybe
usually for hair all I do is just paint it one solid color and then just do a line like a little lighter for the highlight, and that's it.
You know what it is a lot of times, like with acrylic, if I water down, if I get a really medium heavy soft paint on my brush, I can do solid strokes in the hair. With oil, I feel like it's hard for me to get like a viscosity that really draws a line. You know, I struggle to find that, especially when I'm retracing over oil, like more oil paint. You know, so that's one thing that I really struggle with on various portions of this painting, was like doubling back over and not being able to get as dark as I wanted to. And then I would get paint layer too much in like particularly the eyes, where then I couldn't really sculpt it much later. So I was just hoping it would dry, so then I could, get into it. But yeah, I think that made it flatter than I would like to be. But I was happy with how I captured Tanner.
Nice.
I think it does look like you, which is good.
I have two suggestions, and it has to do with what you just mentioned in making it, you just said it feels kind of flat.
Yeah.
I think in building up the values and making it darker, specifically on this side of the face, thinking of that as a solid plane, like obviously I can see that this is being oil paint, this is dried, and it's probably lighter than what was there before, potentially. This whole side of the beard and that side of the hair could be much, much darker, and being on this facet of the face, thinking of a cube, right? With the top facet, the front, the bottom, and the side, this side should generally be darker. So everything that's facing this direction should be darker than anything that's facing outwards. So including the side of the nose, and everything past this terminator should be darker. Mm-hmm. And what that's going to do is create a clear shift in facets and sides, and it's just going to make it much more structurally sound and make it less flat, I guess. All right, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more videos. We're going to be coming out with videos every Thursday night, so look forward to that. The next stage, we are going to be taking this one step further with a full color palette, which is a palette with just titanium white, ivory black, yellow ochre, and vermilion, or our choice of red. We are going to be following the Zorn palette. That's the colors I just listed. And our goal is to continue to refine the drawing, get more accurate color values, and now we're really reaching for full color temperature and accuracy. So the next video will be the final in this series. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.